Welcome to the Mets Pod. On today's show, we get into Brett Baty's big league start, the never-ending roster carousel, and a wild race in the brutal NL East. As always, we take a look down on the farm where some more help could be on the way, and close out the show answering your mailbag questions. Reminder to subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcast. You can watch on SNY's YouTube channel, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Mets Pod. I'm your host, Connor Rogers, joined as always by my co-host, Joe DeMayo. After a wild weekend in Philadelphia, the Mets dropped Game 1 of Part 2 of the Subway Series. Max Scherzer on the hill, one of his tougher starts of the year. Although he gave up 4 earned runs and you call it a tough start, good place to be. Joe, how we doing? How we feeling?
The last week, like you mentioned, the weekend, go to the Atlanta series too. Like it's been a very long week with a lot of people coming and going. It's certainly been fun.
Yeah, the roster carousel has been insane, and we are going to get there, talk about these characters like a Nate Fisher, who was apparently working in a bank just a little bit a year ago. But before we get there, Joe, we have to talk about Brett Baty. The last time we recorded a show, you and I were hammering the table for Brett Baty to be called up to the big league club. It seemed like a crazy conversation not that long ago. And then it happened, and in his first at-bat, his first swing, Baty hits a huge home run against the Braves. A little bit of ups and downs since. We've seen the hard contact. We've seen some struggles in the field, some flashes in the field. Joe, you've watched Baty since before he was a Met, when he was a draft prospect, a first-round pick. The Mets take him with a top 15 selection, and you've watched his growth throughout the minor leagues. This is a little soon to make any kind of overall judgment, but what has been your reaction to Brett's first week in the big leagues?
Well, first off, I'd like to thank the Mets for calling up Baty just like a few hours after we do our show.
You gotta love it.
Just making it very timely for us. But I mean, I think Brett is kind of as advertised and what you would expect from a young player. You know, when we talked about it last week, the defense needs some growth. You saw some good defensive plays from him, but you could tell that, you know, he still has some work to go there. But he hits the ball hard. That's been evidence with the home run. He hit 113 mile an hour ground out. Like, he hits the ball hard. I know he's going through a little bit of a little funk here in the early going, but that's pretty common for prospects that come up. I know that, you know, Michael Harris came out of the gate hot and Vaughn Grissom came out of the gate hot. And I think that kind of makes fans believe that's just how it works. I think Brett just is in a bit of an adjustment period, and once you get Eduardo Escobar back, like I think if you can platoon them, that would be a good move. Escobar hitting up left-handed pitching, and you could kind of protect Brett in a sense of having him face largely just right-handed pitching, and I think that would be a better situation for him. But yeah, so far, doing fine. I think he adds a little bit of length to the lineup where you're not looking at the likes of a Devin Marrero hitting in the 8-hole. So, yeah, I think so far just kind of a typical prospect start.
Yeah, and offensively, that's a platoon that makes a lot of sense. And then you'd have Guillorme as the super defensive replacement, a guy that could also start at second, start at third, wherever you need. Joe, for me, what's impressed me the most with Baty is not the raw power, is not the exit velocity, as much as those things are great. I think, one, his ability to be patient or lay off brutal major league breaking balls. But two, Joe, against lefties, he doesn't look lost against lefties. And I know the numbers aren't kind to him right now offensively. He's not tearing it up. But he's working overall good at bats for a really, really young player that had a cup of coffee in AAA. When you look at it with Brett Baty, this is a guy that essentially made the jump from AA to the big leagues pretty quickly. And I think he doesn't look overwhelmed, in my eyes, by big league pitching from either side.
No, he doesn't look overwhelmed, and that was one of the points that I made. Like, I didn't think this was going to be too big of a stage for him. Obviously, like you said, the numbers aren't great so far, but he's been here for 1 week. So I'm not exactly going crazy over what the specific numbers are. But regarding facing left-handed pitching, he does a good job of staying in, keeping his front shoulder in. He's not opening up and flailing at breaking balls away. And, you know, I'm sure he'll go through some spurts where that's the case. But I don't think when you're thinking long-term with Brett Baty that he is, a platoon guy like I mentioned when Escobar comes back. I think he is going to be essentially a full-time third baseman down the road. I just think in kind of the immediate future, it would be good to just do that to protect him in the near term.
So, a quick little recap before we do look ahead. Like you said, a tough series in Atlanta, a wild finish in Philadelphia as the Mets just have the Phillies number this year. It is insane. We saw the stat that they are 9-0 against games that Wheeler and Nola start, and the fact they took 3 or 4 down in Philadelphia against a much improved Phillies team than what we were used to in the beginning of the year. The Mark Canha game, it was maybe the Mark Canha road trip, Joe, but Canha really put an exclamation point with the 2 home runs, and then the team drops game 1 in a close contest in the Bronx. I know it's always magnified when it's against the Yankees, but it's a little hard to overreact. Even though Scherzer on the hill, the Mets did not hit Domingo Germán again. It felt like overall not a doom and gloom road trip so far. Before, we've been saying it for a long time, this schedule is going to be put on cruise control quite soon.
We said it on last week's show. Hold serve. And if they win the game against the Yankees here on Tuesday night, they did exactly that.
Yep.
Yeah. And the Braves series, they lost 3 or 4. That's brutal. But at the same time, I think they largely lost 3 or 4 because they had 2 starting pitchers get hurt and have to exit the games in the second and third inning with Taijuan Walker and Cookie Carrasco. So they had 2 injuries. I think that kind of disrupted the series and really kind of messed up with how they were using the bullpen. And that led to the cast of characters, the Nate Fishers, the Rob Zastryzny's. Honestly, Sam Clay. Like, these are people that I'm totally going to forget about. And we're going to have to do one of those Sporkle things in the offseason in November or December and just be like, let's see how many 2022 Mets we can name and how many we actually forget.
Yeah, I think the most impressive one, and I guess we'll get into it here. We'll sneak in a mailbag question early because 5 or 6 people asked. It's not even one that I can pull off of one name. Everybody's kind of wondering with Nate Fisher. That was the story of the weekend out of all of the cast of characters. A guy that was on his LinkedIn profile, was working in a bank not that long ago, comes up, gives the Mets 3 big-time innings, keeps them in the game. They come back, they win the game. He's kind of the hero of the day besides Canha, who's more of a household name anyway. So when you look at this, Joe, constant roster crunching, but everybody's wondering, why did they DFA Nate Fisher right away? Why couldn't they make it work with the players that they had to bring back? I know you had a good take before the show kind of explaining exactly that.
Yeah, it was really just a 40-man roster thing. Tomas Nido came off the COVID IL, and when you're on the COVID IL, you don't count towards the 40-man roster. So when you are able to come back, it's almost as if you were on like the 60-day IL and you need to create a 40-man spot. And they also felt the need to add Connor Gray to the roster, so I'm not sure if that's indicative of Taijuan Walker tonight not expected to give length, and they needed somebody ready to go a few innings if necessary. But it was really a 40-man roster thing, and hopefully Fisher clears waivers. But certainly it was a good first 3 innings for Nate Fisher, and hopefully he could stay in the organization because they could use some left-handed relief options here down the stretch.
They really can. And, for the Mets right now with these random players, and it's no disrespect to them, but a lot of these guys have not been in the Mets system. They're not players like that. Like Buto has been in the Mets system, right? He's a name we've talked about for a while. All of these guys pitching in relief help might have been signed in the offseason, might have been picked up from a different club. So the bottom line is that's because the Mets are waiting on the Tylor McGills of the world to come back. The day where David Peterson can finally relax in the bullpen. I don't know if that day's ever happening. Every time we think, hey, it's time for David Peterson to mold into a reliever for the end of the season, somebody gets hurt and he has to fill in. And even one of the most interesting ones, Joe, that we've finally heard a little buzz about, Joey Lucchesi is on his way back as well.
Yeah, Joey Lucchesi threw his first rehab appearance on Sunday down in St. Lucie. And the good news, his velocity was essentially what it was last time he was with the Mets in the major leagues. He was touching 91, 92 miles an hour, which is kind of where he resides. And with that fastball curve combination and his funky delivery. Like we may be kind of grasping at straws here because I think the confidence level in Joely Rodriguez, even though he's been better of late as well, still don't think the confidence level is overly high there. We're kind of trying to figure out, is it a Nate Fisher? Is it David Peterson? Is it Joey Lucchesi? Hopefully amongst those, multiple options, they could find one that could kind of steady the boat there as a left-hand relief option in September. But it's a good sign that Joey Lucchesi, after undergoing Tommy John surgery last summer, able to get back in game action this year. So definitely interested to see his next step. I would guess it would be another appearance in St. Lucie. And then he'll work his way up maybe to Binghamton and Syracuse before you see him in the big leagues, perhaps sometimes in September.
So as we sit here today, the NL East, the wild NL East, the Mets have a 3-game lead on the Braves. And it feels like every time the Mets lose a game, God forbid, and the Braves win and gain a game, there's absolute panic. And it's kind of been this, back and forth. It's been a little bit of ping pong in this. And Joe, I know you've hammered this home that, listen, the Braves are going to play easier teams while the Mets play hard teams, and then it flips the other way. The Mets have 79 wins right now, which is only behind the Dodgers in the National League. And that is only behind the Dodgers in baseball right now. The Yankees, who seem to have the most wins by a mile in New York, are sitting at 75. Yet, the Mets only have this 3-game lead. The Phillies 11 games back in the division, although they are sitting in a wild card spot, which is remarkable to show the difference in the wild card spots right now, where the Braves are compared to the other wild card teams. Joe, this thing might go right down to the wire at this point. It could be a situation where when the Mets go down to Atlanta for 3 games towards the end of the season, those games could be borderline division deciding games, unless the Mets are just playing insane baseball against the weaker schedule they do have in September. But we haven't really seen the Braves let up either.
The Braves are a great team. I mean, they won the World Series last year for a reason. They're pacing for about 100 wins, just like the Mets are pacing for over 100 wins. The Mets are just in a tough division. That's the nature of the beast. But I am not a look behind me kind of guy. Like, if I'm running a race, I'm not trying to look back at the person that's in second, like how close is he to me. I'm just running and I'm going towards the finish line. And that's exactly how the Mets need to look at this. What Atlanta does, it matters, obviously, when you lose games and they seemingly win every time the Mets lose. But they just need to focus on the schedule ahead, which, like we've talked about, over the last couple of weeks. After this Yankee game and this series ends, the schedule is going to soften up. Other than the 3-game set with the Dodgers next week, September's largely Oakland, Pittsburgh, Miami, Washington, teams like that the Mets should be able to beat up on. And, whether that's winning 2 out of 3 for most of those series, sweeping here and there, that's where the Mets can kind of separate themselves from Atlanta, where if the Mets take care of their business, it really doesn't matter what Atlanta does. But certainly, to your point, it wouldn't shock me if that last series against the Braves had division-winning results coming out of it.
All right, so as we sit here, we know Taijuan Walker is starting against the Yankees, which pushes Jacob deGrom back, and we'll have him start a game against the Rockies, whether that's Thursday, Friday, whatever it may be, and then probably sets him up to pitch against the Dodgers at the end of that series. Joe, a lot of people were trying to, it was a lot of gymnastics, wrestling with this decision. To me, it was as simple as they didn't want Taijuan Walker to get cold too long. They didn't want him. They weren't going to IL him. They felt like the back spasms was something he could work back from with just a couple of days rest. And then deGrom is a guy that it probably doesn't hurt to give him rest, preserve his body a little bit. Are you thinking anything else here? Is there any schedule gymnastics at hand, or is it just the fact that Taijuan Walker, if he's going to not do an IL stint, not do any rehab time, needs to pitch immediately?
Yeah, I think it's more what you're saying than worrying about making sure deGrom is lined up to pitch against the Dodgers. I think that's, a good happenstance that
Right.
it works out that way. But I don't think that was the design. And, we're never going to know everything, obviously, and I don't expect the Mets to tell us necessarily everything. Maybe Jacob deGrom said, I could use another day. Like, it wouldn't bother me because he threw over 90 pitches for the first time and he hasn't pitched much over the last calendar year. So it wouldn't shock me if deGrom was like, I could use an extra day. I don't know if that's true, not true, but that could be a factor. And I definitely agree. They didn't want to keep pushing Taijuan Walker out further and further because you want to be cognizant of Bassett being on the rest he wants to be. So it's really kind of working with those guys' schedules. I don't think necessarily the Dodgers series specifically was a target, but as long as everything's good, which it seems like there's no indication that there's anything wrong with anybody here, it might just work out well that you get Jacob deGrom in the Dodgers series.
All right. Yeah, that would be, once again, we know they're not trying to schedule pitchers at this moment for specific series, but it does kind of work out in their favor in this instance. All right. Reminder, you're listening to the Mets Pod. Subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Joe, time to take a look at the farm system right now. And who better to start with than Mark Vientos? I know we've talked about him all year. We were endlessly hoping he'd get a look sometime in July. It didn't happen. But man, he's been sizzling right now on a road trip against the Charlotte Knights. In 6 games, he has 3 home runs, Joe. And it's not just the home runs. He has multi-hit games across the board, driving in runs. His OPS against lefties this year is now sitting at over 1,100, 1,141. Just honestly, video game numbers at this point against lefties. Joe, I have to be the guy to ask it. And this is the question that I'm sure the Mets front office maybe doesn't want to be having. Maybe some fans don't want to hear it. I have no problem with acquiring Darren Ruff. I thought Darren Ruff would personally be hitting for more power earlier against lefties. It's not that he hasn't hit completely, he hasn't been lost at the plate. But this is a Mets team that knew they needed power from the DH spot. They've gotten it from Danny Vogelback. It's as simple as that. With Ruff, we're still sitting here waiting. And you can be patient if there's no one behind you, but Joe, with what Vientos is doing right now, if he gets this call up in September with expanded rosters, which I feel like he has to, and that power translates against lefties, which it's hard to believe it wouldn't, can Vientos make a push and start getting a look at some point to be the DH against lefties? Am I nuts?
I don't think you're nuts. I mean, not only did he have that big week against Charlie, he's hitting over 400 for the month of August, and August is almost over at this point. There's a week left. So he's been absolutely scorching at the plate. And like you said, Darren Ruff has been just okay. Like, he's been fine. I expected, like you said, I thought there was going to be more home run power with Darren Ruff. I thought he was basically going to be just a right-handed Daniel Vogelback.
Sure.
And he's kind of just been fine. He works good at bats. He's had a couple clutch hits. But with Mark Vientos being on the 40-man roster and performing the way he is, I think it would be almost foolish for the Mets to not, give him a look and give him some semblance of a shot, even if it's, splitting time with Darren Ruff against lefties early on and kind of seeing what fits there. But Vientos has been on fire, and you have to imagine when he sees Brett Baty get called up, he sees how this roster's churning. There's got to be some motivation on Mark Vientos' side to be like, I want to be there too during this pennant race. And his performance is showing that he warrants at least that consideration. And, we'll see over the next week or so if the Mets make that call. I would definitely not be opposed to it because at this point, we need to not worry about who was traded for what, who makes what money. The next month and a half of baseball plus or whatever going through the playoffs is about winning each and every game or putting yourself in the best position to do so. And if you look in the mirror and say Mark Vientos gives the Mets a better chance to do that than Darren Ruff, then you play him. You don't worry about it. Don't worry about what you gave up. Doesn't matter.
So let me kind of put you in a tough spot here, Joe. With Vientos, in my opinion, it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, Ruff's OPS is hovering around 600 at this point. The rosters will expand. I believe you get 2 more players. We know Vientos has been on the 40. There's just no really reason for him to not be here in September and get a look and see if he's an upgrade. How do you handle that roster expansion? The bottom line is Francisco Alvarez has not hit in AAA. And I know we'd all love to see him up here. It would be exciting. Sure, the Mets haven't gotten much from catcher this year. I mean, sure, Michael Perez had a nice series, you could say, on the road against the Phillies. But we know long-term what he is. McCann what else needs to be said? Nido coming back is great, but it's not moving the needle in a sense where you feel great about the offense from the position. Do you just bring Alvarez up as well and hope that he catches lightning in a bottle? Or do you have to seriously think about, hey, we need more help in the bullpen and we need more arms? Vientos is the guy hitting. He has to be here as well. How do you don't need a definite answer, but how do you look at this big picture and maybe start to think of how to handle it?
I can't justify bringing up Francisco Alvarez.
I'm with you.
And I love Alvarez, and I think he's going to be I think he's going to be an all-star caliber player for the Mets. I think he's going to be great. Just he's not doing it in AAA right now, which is fine. I know there's some kind of overreaction to that. He 20. Is 20. Yeah, like most 20-year-old catchers would be playing in like St. Lucie or Brooklyn right now, and he's at Syracuse. So he's advanced. He's unique. He's struggling, and as little as they're getting out of the James McCann, Tomas Nido, Michael Perez trio from the offensive side of the ball, you got to value their defense behind the plate. And right now, I couldn't tell you that Alvarez is going to come up and hit significantly better than any of those guys. But I can tell you for sure he's not going to be as good defensively. So I don't think you're getting the value there that makes it worth the Alvarez call-up. Vientos, like we just talked about for the last couple minutes, obviously he fits very well. But if I could add an extra arm, that's certainly something I'm very interested in doing. And, that's where the Tyler McGills, the Joey Lucchesi, David Peterson, kind of that grouping, I think, works its way into the fold.
All right, well, let's talk about one of the arms that you brought up on the show briefly, and this was months ago, because you basically said he's entertaining, and I want to make sure I say his last name right, but Bryce Montes de Oca, Joe?
Nope.
Oca. All right, Montes de Oca.
As it reads.
Listen, all I know about this guy is he's throwing over 100 miles an hour consistently. He's got wicked stuff. He's had a good run lately. A player that kind of has a reputation with that stuff sometimes doesn't know where the ball is going. But lately, Joe, it seems like he's starting to settle down. The strikeout rate is just insane. In Syracuse, he's striking out, 14.1 over 9 innings, which is just, it's not Edwin Diaz in the majors, but man, it's knocking down the door of a very serious strikeout rate that should convert to the major leagues. Is he an option in this scenario? He's 26 years old. He was a former 9th-round pick of the Mets. We know this stuff is big league stuff. Or do you think that, hey, season this guy, let him get more control down there, don't bring him up to games that matter in September?
It's a tough one. It's pretty loaded. So Montes de Oca is a fantastic story. Like you said, he was a 9th-round pick in the 2018 draft. And he did not make his professional debut until 2021 because he had, let me remember, I'm trying to remember the order, but he had shoulder, back, and meniscus/ACL surgeries.
It's a big guy, 6'7", 270.
Yeah, big guy, big injury past. He's had Tommy John surgery already. I think that was in college. So he's had a checkered injury past, and the control definitely comes and goes. But the stuff is unbelievable. Like you said, it's a fastball that'll touch 102. You'll rarely see below 99. His best secondary pitch is his mid-90s cutter. So he'll throw a cutter in the kind of 94 to 96 mile an hour range, and that's his off speed, I guess. He doesn't really throw off speed. It's max effort, max velocity. Yeah, he has one speed, and it's 100%. You'll often see him throw so hard his hat comes off. So he's a joy to watch, and the strikeout rate is fantastic. Like you said, it's second in the Mets organization only to Edwin Diaz. So going from the majors through all levels, he's second in the Mets organization in strikeout rate, but the walk rate is alarmingly bad. So he walked, I think, upwards of 7 per 9 with Double-A, and so do I trust him in a big spot? No, definitely do not. With that said, he is someone that has to, and I presume will, be added to the 40-man roster this offseason to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. So would the Mets consider starting that clock in September and, moving on from a bottom roster guy like a Yohan Lopez or someone like that to give Montes de Oca at least a look? Maybe. but he's not a guy that I'd be looking at as the Mets should call him up imminently so he could be a playoff option. Because playoff baseball, I'd be deathly afraid of putting this man into the game. But he's fun, and you'll see him soon enough.
All right. All right. We're going to get more into a couple of arms in the system during the mailbag. But before we get there, I wanted to briefly touch on Old Timers Day, which, Joe, I don't know if you saw the roster, but
Yeah.
it is unbelievable. And it's one of those things to me that speaks to the changes since Steve Cohen has bought this team of Mets history, reconnecting with players that maybe had interesting endings to their Mets career. You know, whether it was they left in free agency and they were guys that should have been retained, a lot of different stories. It's good to see relationships, I don't know if repaired, but continued with the Mets. I mean, just some of the names that jumped out to me, obviously Bartolo Colon on this list. Johan Santana is on this list. Piazza is going to be there. They got managers ranging from Terry Collins to Willie Randolph, Joe Torre, Edgardo Alfonso is going to be there. Of course, Keith and Ronnie, Daniel Murphy. I mean, you have to look it up just to go through the full thing because it's unbelievable. A lot of members from the great 2006 team, like Andy Chavez, are going to be there. It's just, to me, Joe, it's a fun event for the fans and for the history of the team. But I think it also speaks to a big part of the change this organization is going through in a great way.
There's definitely a focus on embracing Mets history because while the Mets only have 2 World Series championships in their franchise history, that doesn't mean there weren't exciting teams, great teams, memorable teams. I'm actually interested to see like the guys from the '60s that are lacing up the cleats and put it on a jersey. I don't know how much they're going to play or anything, but I'll tell you, when this was dropped initially in the offseason, I was like, that's a cool little thing. Now I saw the roster and everything.
It's unreal.
I feel like I have to be there. I feel like I have to go. So I think I'm going to find my way there on Saturday and get out to Old Timers Day. So if you go to Old Timers Day and you see me, say hi. I'm planning on being there.
Yeah, unbelievable and well done by the Mets, and I'm excited to see what goes down there. I just remember when we had Keith on the show. He might not remember it being on the show, but Keith said he's an old dump truck out there, so it's going to be pretty funny to watch these guys. All right, let's get into the mailbag, Joe. You got a lot of good questions today, and a lot of them, you know, it's like we had to hold off the beginning of the show because we saved so much good stuff for the bullpen. So a lot of it was they wanted an explanation of the DFA of Nate Fisher. We got there already. The first one here from Jason Mull said, could Josh Walker be a lefty option in the pen down the stretch? Josh is somebody we've talked about on this show that started out the year injured, has returned, was one of the better arms in their minor league system this year, and is, once again, the long search for a lefty reliever potentially. Joe, what have you seen from Walker before this year when he was healthy and since his return now?
Yeah, I think Walker's an option because why not? I mean, we saw the list of names that we talked about. Why can't we add Josh Walker to that list?
Yeah,
he was a former draft pick from the University of New Haven, and he doesn't have huge stuff, but if they shift him to the pen, I think you could see that fastball maybe touch more 94 rather than kind of low 90s. But since he's come back, he's been fantastic. He's striking out hitters. He's not giving up hits. So far, it's been a good checkpoint for Walker. And given kind of the roster manipulation that they've been doing, it wouldn't shock me if we saw Josh Walker tomorrow or whatever. They don't play tomorrow, Thursday. And it wouldn't shock me if we didn't see him at all this season. Who knows? But he's certainly somebody I think that should be on the radar. And based on their actions over the last week, anyone that's with AAA Syracuse should be on your radar as someone that can maybe get called up even if for a day.
I think so as well. I mean, 2 appearances in Syracuse for him this season, a little over 4 innings and 7 strikeouts, 1 earned run. And obviously somebody that rose through the ranks last year, started out in Brooklyn, ended the season in Syracuse. So Walker is definitely somebody that it's not a matter, of if he's going to get a big league look, but it should happen soon enough. All right, old friend Steve Miller asked, will any Mets player be a Gold Glove finalist this year, Joe? I was curious what you thought of this one because it feels like the Mets, for a really good defensive team, plus defenders all along the board. Lindor at short, McNeil at second, Guillorme on wherever he's playing on any given day. Nimmo's quietly been very reliable in center field. We've seen Marte's arm play in right field. Yet, Joe, I don't think anybody on the Mets is going to win a Gold Glove, which is kind of interesting to me.
I imagine Lindor's squarely in play.
He
He's
should
obviously
be.
he's been fantastic. So I imagine there's a good shot of him potentially winning the shortstop Gold Glove. But the one that sticks out to me is Jeff McNeil. I mean,
He's
he's
been
been
tremendous.
tremendous at second base. And if you just use outs above average, which is baseball savant's defensive metric, he's second to only Tommy Edman in
Okay.
outs above average amongst second basemen in the National League. So I think you're kind of looking at your middle infielders; those feel like your best chance at Gold Gloves. And outside of that, I don't think Pete's winning one. I don't think anyone in the outfield. Marte and Nimmo have done a great job in right and center respectively, but I don't think Gold Glove worthy. So we'll see. But I think the middle infield bears watching, and just the point to McNeil beyond just the stats. He feels like he makes every play, whether it's to his left, whether to its right, whether it's coming in, going back. His growth as a second baseman has been immense. So I know we talked last week about a Pete Alonso extension. Should the Mets consider that? I think the conversation has to also include Jeff McNeil. Is that someone that they should look into extending in the offseason?
McNeil's long-term future is fascinating to me because we've gone over. He's a guy that came up as a 26-year-old, was an all-star as a 27-year-old, is under team control for the next 2 years, both 2023 and 2024 seasons. So he will not hit free agency until he's knocking on the door of around 33 or 32 and a half years old, where Joe, to your point, maybe there's some common ground of pay out the arbitration years, tack on an extra year or two so he's under team control when he's 33, 34 years old. He doesn't play center field or shortstop where you're worrying about, oh, when he gets to this spot, he's got to move to a corner. Second baseman, and a really good second baseman with good range. His bat to ball skills should translate over time and age. They shouldn't deteriorate like a lot of guys do with power. They lose their power. So I like where your head's at and think maybe there's some common ground for the team to get one of the rare steals of an extension done. We see the Braves do it every week. It drives us nuts. Maybe the Mets could knock on that door as well. All right, this one from Dan B, who said, with the ongoing bullpen issues, how realistic is it Buck goes with a two-starter approach in the playoffs? The starter goes 5 to 6 innings, DeGrom. Then Walker or Peterson pitches through the eighth, handing the ball to Diaz in the ninth.
I mean, I guess situationally you could do that, but that can't be the strategy.
No,
Like it can't
it's
just be every
impossible.
game. Yeah, you can't do that. But is it something that should be considered? Yes, everything should be considered. And commenting on the bullpen at large, I think obviously they could have done more at the trade deadline to address it. I think we talked about that then, and it's obviously proving true. Going on close to a month later. But one thing that I want to say too, I think there is talent in the bullpen. I think Ottavino's been great this year, specifically if you have him just start an inning fresh. He struggles with letting inherited runners score, but if he starts clean, he's been very, very good this year. We're starting to see a little more good Seth Lugo than bad Seth Lugo, which is a good sign. Trevor May obviously hasn't been good since he's come back, so you're hoping that he could kind of rebound. And one thing that I saw tweeted yesterday, people forget when the Nationals won the World Series in 2019, in the regular season, they actually had the worst bullpen in baseball. So the regular season results obviously matter, but when you're talking about the playoffs, I don't know necessarily how much what happened in the regular season necessarily translates to the playoffs. So I look at this bullpen as, yes, it's not the strongest bullpen. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. But I think there's enough talent in there that you can make it work in the postseason. Because I mean, we've seen it on the offensive side. In 2015, who thought Daniel Murphy was putting the Mets on their back? So you just need someone to step up for like a 3-week span. That's really all it is. I mean, you'll think about that in like NFL playoffs when you cover football. You just need someone to step up for those couple weeks. I think the Mets have guys that have the potential to do that in the postseason.
Yeah, and there's a lot of guys that we just don't know what they're going to be for this team. And what I say by that is Lucchesi has started his rehab assignment. Can he be the lefty? McGill, who we admittedly have huge expectations for in this bullpen. I see a world where the high leverage role they envisioned Trevor May having when they signed him to that 2-year deal that has not played out this year well at all. It's been really bad, to be honest. McGill can take that role from Trevor May. Drew Smith is working his way back. Tommy Hunter is not going to be a guy pitching in playoff games, but you need veteran bullpen arms for September. That's why you went out and got Michael Givens for nothing, and Tommy Hunter's working his way back. Those guys are guys that you need to throw valuable innings in September that can maybe preserve some of the high leverage guys for October. So it's easy to be down and out about the pen, and I find myself that way at times. But you're 100% right, Joe. The way games are managed in the playoffs is so drastically different. You're not tapping into the back end of the bullpen in the playoffs. You are throwing your arms, your high leverage arms, as much as you can. And for all the talk about David Robertson, who's been amazing this year, the Phillies tried to throw his arm completely off his body by pitching him a day after he threw 37 pitches. And I think we saw how that worked out.
Yeah, you have to be smart, and I think that's something Buck is doing here. I think there is some design behind the kind of random guys that are coming and going. I think he does have that, and it's the front office as well. That long-term vision of the rest of the season of, okay, obviously we want to win every game we can, but at the same time, we can't have Seth Lugo, Adam Ottavino, Trevor May cooked by the postseason. So if you're able to preserve them and, pick and choose your day where you're using, the likes of Rob Zastryzny and Nate Fisher, and you're using those guys, like if you can pick and choose your spots to do that, I think that's only going to help the Mets' chances when you get into October.
All right, so on deck before we talk to you guys again, the Mets have one more game remaining with the Yankees, the game in the Bronx. If the Mets win, they would take the season series 3-1. 4 games with the Rockies, who, to be polite, Joe, have been very bad this year, and 3 with the Dodgers. That series will be kicking off the next time we talk to you guys. So, Joe, closing thoughts on today's episode of the Mets Pod.
They pretty much held serve. Maybe we'll officially hold serve after Tuesday night's game. We'll see if the Mets are able to get to Frankie Montas like everyone seemingly has since he's joined the Yankees. And then, like you said, the schedule starts to trend in the Mets' favor. They have the Rockies for 4. After the Dodgers, then September is going to be a potentially fun month where the Mets
September swamp.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
And listen, I don't want to keep talking about it and jinx them and they spiral, but I can't say enough. The Pirates twice, the Cubs, the A's, the Nationals. Go ahead, Joe.
They should have a successful month of September. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to, sweep every series or whatever, but they should in theory have a successful September. But this stretch of Atlanta, Philly, and the Yankees, the Mets came out of it alive. So all things considered, it could have definitely gone worse. And, they just have to look ahead and realize that they essentially control their own fate.
Came out of it alive in a stretch where Carrasco went down early, Taijuan Walker went down early, Trevor Williams, David Peterson, Jose Butto all had to start key games. So yeah, look at the bright side. Look at the glass half full, Mets fans. Reminder to subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch on SNY's YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll catch you next week.